What makes you passionate about public service?
Well, just those words like serving the public. I'm a fourth generation veteran. You know, you serve your country, you serve your community, you serve your family. The big thing I'm pushing for at the moment is an Aldi. If we have some competition in the supermarket chain, then that's going to help. We've done a review as a federal government across the country, and we know a basket of the same groceries at Aldi is 25% cheaper than everywhere else.
What's the best way in your mind to attack and bring down rising power costs in Australia, and what's the federal government doing about it at the moment?
Ideally, renewables is absolutely the way to cheaper power prices in the future. That's why net zero is so important, and making this transformation in our economy to renewables is so vital.
Hey guys, I was checking out our data for the last month and realised that over 90% of the people watching our videos are not yet subscribed. If you've ever found value in our videos or enjoyed the conversations, hit that subscribe button now. It really helps our channel more than you can imagine, and it's the only thing I'll ever ask from you. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Member for Solomon, Luke Gosling. Mate, thanks for joining us on the NextGenNorth podcast.
Mate, awesome to be here.
You're a busy man, I understand. What's on the agenda at the moment, mate? What's keeping you busy?
Yeah, we were down in Canberra last week for Parliament, but I've got a number of responsibilities, I suppose. Obviously, foremost to the people of Darwin and Palmerston, and to the territory more broadly. But the Prime Minister recently gave me a new job. He's Special Envoy for Defence, Veterans and Northern Australia.
Yep.
So in the last month or so, that's kept me real busy. Good thing is a lot of that is up here. So, it sort of overlaps with the work I do anyway.
Yep.
But I'm also the chair of a committee called Regional Development, Infrastructure and Transport. And at the moment, we're doing an inquiry into the financial sustainability of local government.
Okay.
So, that's also keeping me pretty busy. When you combine that with representational duties overseas, in about a month's time, I've got to go over to India to represent the government in a dialogue over there. They're really important partners of ours in the Indo-Pacific, obviously. So, super busy at a local level, but there's national and international responsibilities as well.
Yep.
So tying that all together with my family responsibilities, Kate and I got two young kids,
Yep.
Sally and Frank. So, putting all that together is keeping me real busy.
Yep, great. Well, it sounds like you're always on the move. And you've had a long and decorated career, not only as a member of the ADF, but also as a poly. What makes you passionate about public service?
Well, just those words like serving the public. I always saw, I'm a fourth generation veteran. I guess that's been something in our family, is that, you serve your country, you serve your community, you serve your family. And I'm not saying in that order, but like that is what a good member of society does in some way, shape or form.
Yep.
Some people do that through volunteering. Some people, crazy enough to put their hand up for politics, and I admire anyone who does do that, because you cop a fair bit of feedback and scrutiny from people along the way. But I think I saw service in the army as as kind of service to the nation. But I thought, when I put my hand up for politics, I thought, particularly for Darwin. Darwin's so important. So important for the territory that Darwin thrives, so important for our nation that Darwin thrives and does well. And not just from a defence and security perspective, but from an economic perspective, right, from a food security, energy security, water security perspective. It's so vital. And I just thought that, I could do a good job representing Darwin and when I say Darwin, I mean, greater Darwin, Palmerston and further afield. And we need people who want to give it a red-hot crack and are prepared to work hard to get the outcomes. And so far, people have, given me their confidence to do that job, and I'll keep doing it for as long as they've got confidence in me. Obviously, the Prime Minister's got confidence in me, sees a future for me in the ministry after the next election. Why is that important? Because we need to be at the table where decisions are made. It's one thing to represent your constituency as a member of parliament, but you've got to get into the room around the table where the decisions are being made about not only the allocation of resources, but the allocation of priorities. And they kind of go together, but we need to make developing Northern Australia broadly, but developing Darwin and the Northern Territory, which is a big priority for Albo, now the current Prime Minister and our team. But you've got to continually fight for that, because in different areas of the country where there's more population, there's more elected members. And we're always battling against that thing called kind of a geographic narcissism. And people from down south don't like it when I use that term, but they probably don't like it because they can't handle the truth. And the truth there is that they kind of look up here and say, that's somewhere to visit. It's somewhere to go to Kakadu and see crocodiles and go to Uluru and, have kind of an experience in Northern Australia, but they kind of don't see us as an advanced manufacturing hub, as an IT data centre more broadly. They don't see us necessarily until they go to one of our markets as an Asian city in the region, which
gateway
we are.
to Asia and all that sort of thing.
The gateway. And how do we make that real? We've got to build population. Building population comes into tension then with the territory lifestyle, because we want to build our population so that we've got kind of access to amenity and the types of experiences and shops and shows and everything that they have down south. But we kind of don't want too big a population. But I think it's Darwin and the territory is not for everyone, and we like it that way. But I think we want to introduce more people to the territory, because I think building our economy is going to be good for the nation more broadly, but it's also going to provide more opportunities for young territory kids so they stay here. And I guess that's one of the saddest things for me, is when I understand why young territory kids want to go down south and go to uni or want to get some work experience on the East Coast. But we want to make sure there's enough going on here so they go, I'm going to take what I learned here back home, because we're now getting the critical mass to develop, for instance, our screen production sector. Like more and more films are coming up here, and not just for the landscape, but for the quality people that we've got up here when it comes to the screen industry. And I guess just a bit of a segue, that's one of my passions within the federal parliament. I started a group called the Parliamentary Friends of Australian Children's Storytelling. I want to have more of our kids in Australian storytelling, more Australian stories told to Australian kids, more opportunities for Australian companies to make Australian content, and to get the streamers to take more content. And that's another example where legislation, regulation can make a difference, because we can say, look, if you want access to the Australian market, then work with us and take some of our content. And our content continues to impress overseas houses and bigger screen production companies, and they want to do more collaboratively with us. I'm just using that as an example of the work in Parliament is not just passing legislation, as important as that is. It's also about advocacy and saying, look, work with us to deliver an outcome for Australian industry, and that's how you maintain your social licence.
Well, I think that's a really good scene setter, and I really want to get into your parliamentary duties in a bit more detail soon. But I just wanted to focus on the population side of things. Do you have any idea about what might be the sweet spot in terms of growing the territory population, and how we can sort of maintain that balance between an outback lifestyle as well as having really strong amenity for our residents?
Well, strong amenity for our residents is something I'm getting after every day. That is, it's really with airfares. They're kind of number one. because we want enough amenity here so that people go, we've got enough here that our family is happy. Good schools, and we've got $1 billion deal we did with the NT government to make sure that all Territory public schools are fully funded, 20 years ahead of what they were scheduled to be on track for. And housing, obviously housing, we've got less than 1% rental vacancy at the moment. We need more houses. And that can come into tension as well, because no one wants to have housing developments go on around them. But the reality is that, we can't all live on rural blocks. We need a bit of a mix. We need some medium density housing. We need housing where people can have their own little backyard, as every Australian should be able to have, if that's what they want. But, I've been funding pools. We've got brand new pools in Palmerston and in Casuarina now. Pratt Pool's new. Nightcliff, one of the most spectacular pools in the nation, is still in pretty good shape. Pools are important because it's hot. But also a youth engagement hub was one of the most important things to me. So for Casuarina, there's funding there to build that hub, and we really need to crack on with the new NT government and get that built in Casuarina. But also, we've got a big veteran and first responder community up here. So I've also got some funding there for some supported accommodation. What happened last week in Canberra, it was the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide was handed down. And one of the things it told us is that the real danger period for anyone, any occupation that is that has some element of PTSD involved, and I really want to give a shout out to all the police and emergency services here, because they're on the front line every day, sort of dealing with shocking things, so that the general public don't have to. That's a service they provide for our community. So the Scott Palmer Centre, named after Scott Palmer, who was a veteran Territory soldier who was killed in Afghanistan, named after him, in honour of him. We've got funding for that, so that if there's a point where a veteran or a first responder needs some help with accommodation, they've got somewhere to stay, we'll wrap around them with resources, and that sort of amenity is important as well. And then there's the people that want a Myers and that, and I just don't know if we're going to have the population in the near term to have a big apartment store like that. But the big thing I'm pushing for at the moment, in addition to airlines and airfares, and I'll get to that in a second, is an Aldi. So I've been in talks with Aldi for some time. I've got to put a little package together with a local company about what that could look like. If we have some competition in the supermarket chain, then that's going to help. We've done a review as a federal government across the country, and we know that Aldi, a basket of the same groceries at Aldi is 25% cheaper than everywhere else. So when people are struggling with cost of living, that sort of amenity is important as well.
But do they need 500,000 people or something like that? Aldi was saying, is that not true, or what's the go there?
No, that's not true. So their line at the moment is that we currently do not have a plan for an Aldi in Darwin.
Okay.
That's exactly what they were saying a month before they announced the new Aldi in Mackay. Okay. And Mackay in Queensland has a smaller population than ours.
Right.
Now, it is a long way up the track from Adelaide, or a long way across through the Isa if they replan us from the eastern seaboard. But it is in collaboration with local big business where we'll get that logistics sweet spot for them. Okay. So I'm not saying there's no logistic issues we have to help Aldi with. Yep. But the NT government is going to give them some land, and we're going to obviously continue to work with them. But if you consider that Officeworks, Macca's, Bunnings, all of them, they don't make their stuff here in Darwin locally. It all comes from interstate. So they've managed to get the sweet spot. And to get back to your original question, is where's the sweet spot going to be for the Territory? Well, some people say, look, double our current population of 250 and we get to 500.
Yep.
in my mind, that can't all be in Greater Darwin and Palmerston, because we've got a certain footprint here. We also want to maintain our our lifestyle, get that balance right. We could definitely take more. It's going to need some medium density accommodation, housing, obviously. But we want to grow our regions as well. So like Catherine's got a big, bright future. Tennant Creek, with everything that's going on down there, with sun cable, wind, gas, all these big potential, and they are potential sectors, industries. But then whenever you can get your hands on good water supply, that means that agriculture is possible as well in larger scales. And Alice Springs, we want Alice Springs to grow and develop. So I'm not just saying all the growth is going to be up here in Darwin and Palmerston, but I think most people think that sort of 250,000, 250,000 for Greater Darwin out into the rural area might be a sweet spot where we've tipped that 200,000 trigger that a lot of companies, businesses look at in order to invest. And what I think where we're going to be lucky is that that's not going to happen immediately. So we're going to grow, and people are going to get used to it and have an ability to go, yep, I think, for Territorians, they're going to have the opportunity to go, I think this amount of development is enough. But what's absolutely vital is we need to protect the environment. So as we grow, we need to make sure that we're not harming our water, we're not harming the environment, we're not having unlawful land clearing, that we're putting a value on our environment, because that, let's face it, that's one of the biggest reasons people love living here, because they love getting out camping and they love going fishing. Take that away, and then it makes the downsides of the build-up before it starts raining and it's beautiful again. It starts not to add up to people if they're paying an absolute fortune to be reconnected with family and friends interstate as well. So I met with Qantas in Canberra last week, have those conversations as I often do. How well are you doing out of these routes? Do you think you can give us a bit of a break on the cost of airfares? And they, of course, say, well, there's Jetstar as well. Jetstar provides, more affordable fares. Virgin are pulling out of their Darwin routes a bit, which provides us with a challenge.
Does the Darwin Airport Corporation play a role in that as well?
Absolutely, and I talk with them as well, because they set the landing fees. So, there's a tension there between the airlines and the landing fees. There's a further tension between the ADG, Airport Development Group, that owns the Darwin International Airport, and their landlord, which is the Royal Australian Air Force.
Right.
So we are currently undergoing, a little bit of a difficult time. The use of the airfield is constrained whilst we fix it, but we need to fix it. Like a strategic airfield of the north, it's got to be, good to go. And by the end of the year, that's what it will be. But in the meantime, I've been helping to make sure that Defence, pays their fair share of the airport runway repairs, and ADG, who are the major user of it, outside of pitch black or something like that, of course, when we've got a lot more military aircraft in town for those couple of weeks. But we also don't want the Airport Development Group to pass on all those costs onto the airlines through landing fees, because that'll, again, put up the airfares, and that's exactly what we don't want.
Right. Well, given your military bona fides, can you just maybe go into a little bit of a history of your own family history with the military, and then maybe explain a little bit about the implications for Darwin and the North in relation to the defence of Australia?
Yeah, very happy to. In short, I'm a fourth generation veteran, as my or 3 brothers served, 2 operationally in Timor 25 years ago with Interfet. One of my brothers spent 28 years in the army. I only spent 13 years in the army, but proud of my service that continued service in our family from World War I with our great-grandfather, World War II with our pop, our father's father, our pop. He served in the Second World War, and in the infantry, as our dad did in Vietnam, with the infantry, and 2 of my brothers and I were also in the infantry, and one who's a fiery here in Darwin, he was in the Navy with Interfet. And I mentioned that 25 years ago with Interfet because this week here in Darwin we're going to commemorate 25 years of Australians, and in our case, people from Darwin and Palmerston and the Territory, giving Timor a hand.
Right.
Whether it be 25 years ago with Interfet, and that's when the whole Darwin community come together to really get around those refugees when they come over as well.
Yep.
Through to the current day. So we've still got Australian Army and Australian Federal Police serving over in Timor to work with their defence and their police. But yeah, serving in Timor was a great honour for me. Carry on the traditions established by our commandos in World War II, and that was really a driver for me actually to want to join the army and get into the commandos. As not only had my family served over a number of generations, but in the little country town where we grew up, there were 2 brothers who served as commandos in Timor in 1942. And basically, Darwin was bombed because the Japanese were at the same time invading Timor. So then these little band of commandos headed to the hills of Timor and just fought this amazing guerrilla warfare campaign with the support of the Timorese people. And that's why they feel such a strong debt of honour to the Timorese people. And that kind of carried on into our generation that wanted to sort of repay that debt of honour that we had to the Timorese from World War II, and sort of help them to just kick off their future as an independent country. And we've got both Qantas and Air North flying there, 1-hour flight from Darwin these days, and I'm really encouraging people who served in Timor to go back and see how far they've come, and just appreciate the beauty, because you're not pumping around with a big pack on, sweating your backside off. You can actually go scuba diving. You can climb up into the mountains, and Mount Ramelau, their highest spot, is higher than Mount Kosciuszko. That tiny little island of East Timor with its beautiful mountain villages and running streams and coral reefs and awesome fishing. It's a tiny little island, but its highest point is higher than the highest point in Australia. But you can climb that and watch the sunset and see the whole island as the sun comes up over East Timor. It's
magic.
Really amazing. And it's got its own military history, the same that Darwin's got. So I'm continually saying to people, come up to Darwin, get out to East Point Military Museum, our Aviation Military Museum, and really get a sense of our wartime role in the North, which really hasn't changed. So that sort of gets me to today, where as a new government, new Labor government under Elbow, we basically came in and did a defence strategic review. We just basically said, right, what do we need our defence force to be able to do? We're heading into more uncertain waters in the Indo-Pacific in terms of regional uncertainty. There's tensions in the South China Sea, but there's also strategic competition that means that we're going to have to work with our partners and allies to make sure that we maintain regional balance of power, because we need to maintain, if we're going to maintain a peaceful, prosperous, open, free, fair region, which we've really fought hard for but taken for granted a little bit over since the Second World War, we're going to have to make sure that everyone's kind of prepared to play by those rules, because those rules have been developed by the international community to keep things pretty fair, open, and if you've got a problem, you don't sort of fix that problem by bombing someone into submission. What we need is a region where we work together through organisations like ASEAN or out in the Pacific, the Pacific Islands Forum, and countries need to sort of appreciate that smaller countries have their own agency, but we also need to be realists, and we need to be in a position where we can defend ourselves and defend our interests in the region. So what that means, in short, is that we developed a national defence strategy, and out of that came an integrated investment program. So the dollars in order to enact our national defence strategy. Now, what that means for us is that $14 to $18 billion worth of investment in Northern Australian bases and in the bases and the logistic connectors, the communications connectors that mean that we can not only defend Australia from the north, we can project power into the Indo-Pacific in partnership with allies and partners in order to maintain peace and stability in our region. That's it. Yep. That's a short story. What that means for us is people would have seen there's massive investment going into Larrakia. We've got at HMAS Coonawarra a new wharfs facility, heaps of investment going into Robbo Barracks out in Palmerston, heaps of investment going into the training areas, and there's going to be more and more training here where Australians and our allies and partners are training together to improve interoperability. So when it comes to responding to natural disasters in our region, responding to aggression from any aggressors in our region, we can work together in a more seamless and effective way. But those training areas, Bradshaw down near Timber Creek, we've got Mount Bundy training area. I was out there recently seeing some training between the US, the UK and us, working together, live fire training, getting used to working as a team. But also Kangaroo Flats, there's a training area out there. There's a training area near Robertson Barracks. So we've put a lot of money into developing those training areas so that they're fit for purpose, and because a lot of our regional partners haven't got big open skies, haven't got big open waters like we have, and haven't got big training areas that are, in Bradshaw's case, the size of some European countries, in order to really do some effective training. So at the moment we've got 15 navies here. So it might be 20 navies, and 15 warships and a submarine that's cruising around, making all those 15 warships very nervous. And that's the brilliance of submarines, is that it can keep everyone guessing about where they are because no one really knows. And that's Exercise Kakadu. So Exercise Pitch Black is a huge deal when it comes to regional air forces. We even had European air forces coming over to join us this year. And then we've got Talisman Sabre, which is a big Air Force, Navy, Army, regional partners and allies coming together. That all generates economic, it stimulates the economy because they all need to be fed and accommodated. We've got down there at Howard Springs, obviously, we've got that facility that helps with the accommodation piece, because we don't want to take all the hotel rooms, because we also need tourists to be able to come up here and be able to stay somewhere that they can afford, so they can have a good time up here. So I think they're some of the big drivers for us: defence, agriculture, but tourism, and I guess just tie that back into the arts is why these world-class internationally renowned artists that we have here in the Territory, and in our neighbours, those regional areas on the NT-WA border, down in SA and the APY lands, and we've got incredible First Nations artists, and we want to be able to show them in world-class art galleries, and that's why the art gallery here in Darwin, the new one, but also down in Alice Springs, are so important, because that allows people, whether they're flown in from overseas or Australians, to really get an opportunity to be up close and personal with not only the art, but the artists themselves.
Yep. So if Australia was to be embroiled in a conflict to the north, are we in a state of readiness, in your opinion? Are we where we need to be, or...?
It's a good question. We need to be in a position where we can work with our partners, firstly, because when you take the US, for example, our ally from World War II, who really, saved us in World War II, the battle for Australia in the Coral Sea, we need to be interoperable with them firstly, and a lot of our weapon systems and our tactics and procedures already are, because we have been working with them for a while. That they are a force multiplier for us to deter, but we need our own sovereign capability, and that's what kind of AUKUS is about. And the Pillar 1, which is the submarines, is that I was on one of our Australian submarines a couple of weeks ago in Perth. We use the same conventional weapon system, torpedoes, and weapon system that the Americans use. We often have their submariners with us. Also went on one of the Virginia-class submarines, which will be the one that we get. I'm talking about submarines because they're the best deterrent that we have. They're the thing that's out there. No one really knows where they are. They're doing their job, which is to deter aggression against us, but also to maintain the freedom of navigation. We are a trading company. That means that the lifestyle that we've got as Australians, which is unreal compared to almost anywhere in the world. I know people do it tough when cost of living becomes unaffordable, but when you have a look at the safety nets, universal healthcare, universal public education, as well as health, we have a good standard of living that is underpinned by our trade. That trade is dependent on the freedom of ships to be able to safely navigate trading routes.
Yep.
So that's part of the reason why submarines are so important. We are expanding our defence budget because we need to bring critical capabilities on sooner, and even sooner than we forecast in the National Defence Strategy. We no longer have a 10-year warning to potential conflict escalation. It could happen a lot sooner than that. We hope for peace. We hope that China and the United States can compete strategically, peacefully. That's our great hope. But we just can't hope. We've got to have a defence force that is able to, as I said, defend us. So we need to spend more in defence, but keep our other priorities, keep it all sensible. But it means that over the next 10 years, we're going to need to spend an extra $50 billion in the defence budget.
Yep.
And that may have to go higher.
Right.
But it underpins the freedoms that we have. It underpins the rights to protest, as we saw in Melbourne, last week. There was a Land Forces conference. There was a lot of protest activity there. People want peace. We all want peace, but it doesn't mean that you just have to hope for the best. You have to have an insurance policy called an Australian Defence Force that can defend us and our interests and defend the right, essentially, of protesters to protest. You reckon they're out on the streets in numerous countries around the world that have totalitarian authoritarian regimes? One, they're not choosing their own government, and two, they do not have the right to protest unless they want to go to a jail somewhere where their loved ones, no idea where they are. I don't use that example to be melodramatic, but I think sometimes people have got to remember that the rights and responsibilities that we have as citizens of a free country include not only universal health, education, and a social welfare safety net, but it also requires the need to spend money on the defence of our great nation. Now, when we look at what we spend as a nation, the NDIS budget, the National Disability Insurance Scheme budget, for example, which has blown up, and we're trying to, get rid of the shonks that are taking the piss, frankly, of that great scheme for Australians with a disability. But there's been shonky operators that have been creaming it, and so we're getting rid of them. But the budget of that, has been getting close to what was our defence budget not long ago. Our education budget, but particularly our health budget, is incredibly high. I'm always fighting for more funds for our health budget because we have some of the worst health outcomes in the country. And after I left the army and I did some work over in East Timor, running a charity, I did some health projects with that charity, but I also did some work in Indigenous health, so getting doctors and nurses out into Aboriginal communities in the Northern Territory. And, it just shocks people to come from interstate and just to see how people are living in some of those communities. So I'm proud of the focus that we're putting on building culturally appropriate accommodation out there in the 100 communities in the Northern Territory, because we'll get better health outcomes as well. If we can combat overcrowding, then better health outcomes will come. But frankly, some of the health outcomes that we have in the Northern Territory, they're similar to third world countries that you hear about in certain parts of Asia and Africa.
Yep. Cost of living, I think, is an interesting one that's really battering Aussie households at the moment, particularly I think that's fed by or contributed to by the rise of power costs. What's the best way in your mind to attack and bring down rising power costs in Australia? And what's the federal government doing about it at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. So inflation started going up from where all... I don't want to get too political, but it's been a problem for both governments. Let's just put it that way, at the federal level. The Reserve Bank started raising interest rates, which affects every mortgage holder. In the last government under the coalition, they continued to go up under our government, and that has made it tougher for people with their mortgages. Since we come to government, we've halved inflation, but the Reserve Bank hasn't quite got the confidence yet to start decreasing the inflation rate. But we're confident that because as inflation has started to moderate, we're hoping that that'll give the Reserve Bank the room to give mortgage holders in particular a bit of a break. That is going to be really helpful to people with a mortgage as far as cost of living pressures go. Your question was about electricity prices as well.
It just seems to be going one way, unfortunately, power prices. Yep.
Ideally, renewables, cheapest form of power, getting them into the grid is absolutely the way to cheaper power prices in the future. That's why net zero is so important, and making this transformation in our economy to renewables is so vital. We're helping that happen in a variety of ways by investing in or co-investing in renewables projects, co-investing with industry in critical minerals projects. Why are they important? Because batteries, which make solar work, which makes wind work because you can store power, those critical minerals that are vital for those batteries, they're there in the territory in big amounts. So helping industry to get those critical minerals online, helping companies like Sun Cable, which are going to build the biggest solar precinct in the world down in Central Australia or Central Northern Territory, that's vital as well. Practically what we've done is given every household, no matter how much you earn, a $300 towards energy bills for the year. Some people might not think that makes enough of a dent, but when you consider the massive amount that the NT government subsidises everyone's power at the moment, a combination of Northern Territory government and federal government subsidies is going to help people with their power bills there. But the key is going to be getting renewables into the grid. That's going to be the real game changer. That's why we're so focused on a renewable future, and we've got so many programs to assist companies in turning that on. We've got so much international interest in that renewable energy power as well. So Sun Cable, for example, people have heard that power's going to go to Singapore, but 2/3 of it's going to come into the Darwin grid for the territory, for industry, and to drive industries that are going to take advantage of that cheap renewable power, because all of their customers are demanding renewably or energy responsible green products.
Yeah.
So there's a transformation in the globe. We're part of that. Net zero is part of that. That's what our government is committed to, and that will drive more renewable energy, which will drive lower power prices for Territorians, and that's all we hope for. But we can't depend on that entirely to sort of fix this cost of living crisis that particularly low income households are facing, and that's why we've through investing in and so funding and supporting people who are on the lowest award wages. So it's 2.7 million Australians, and a lot of Territorians are on those lower income awards. We've increased those awards by 5.7%. So people are taking home more, but we also wanted them to keep more of what they earned, which is why we gave a tax cut in the last budget, which kicked in on the 1st of July this year. Everyone to have a tax cut, not just high income earners, which was going to be the situation, but we changed it so that all income earners are getting a tax break. 85% of Territorians, so lower income people, middle income people, and people on pretty good wages but not high. So 85% of Territory taxpayers. So all Territory taxpayers are going to get their tax cut, but 85% of taxpayers are going to be much better off. Those that are on the really high incomes, they won't be quite they won't get as much of a tax cut as they were going to get previously, but they'll still get a tax cut. What that means is people are going to take home more of their pay. So low and middle income people earning more, but taking home more of what they earn. That's kind of been our focus, and that's going to help with the cost of living as well.
I guess the fundamental question in my mind when I hear politicians in particular talk about renewables and cheap power and being able to power an economy is can we power an industrial economy, a manufacturing economy in the Territory with renewables? I mean, it's hard to see where it's worked around the world at the moment. I think Germany couldn't make it work. They've had to sort of deindustrialise to some extent to try and get their economy going again. What is it about something like the Sun Cable that's backed by batteries that'll have a better chance of working?
Because the Germans haven't got Territory sunshine for us. No, I don't mean as a flippant comment, but we've got some of the best solar radiance in the world. Sun Cable are confident, but let's see. We can't put all our eggs in the Sun Cable basket, but there's enough interest at the moment out there for people to do solar large here. 10% is what they, the scientists and the mathematicians who study all this stuff reckon they'll lose with the way that it's transported under these undersea cables to Singapore.
Transmission loss.
Transmission loss of 10%. So obviously much less just going straight up the track into the Middle Arm Sustainable Development precinct there, where there is a lot of interest, a lot of foreign interest in things like green hydrogen. I think if we can do green steel as well, that'll be fantastic. But, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to go in.
Mm-hmm.
There's that corridor that's needed up the centre of the Northern Territory that where they need the poles and wires essentially to transport that power.
Yep.
They need to raise the capital on the international markets. We'll obviously give them a hand federally. That gives international markets a bit more confidence as well. I haven't looked at the Germany case study in any detail, but I think it is going to stand up for us just because of we've got the space, we've got the solar radiance,
yep,
and we've got the customers that are interested, including some German customers.
right.
So I think at the scale,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to be able to make it work.
Yep.
But yeah, obviously there's roles for other. We don't, have. Fortunately, I think we don't have coal up here, so that's not part of our mix. So it just means that there's even more focus on renewables. Obviously, gas will continue to have a role, big export markets,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a transitional
Yep.
energy. So
How do you see Beetaloo gas as being involved in that transition? Is that a part of your vision to get to that renewable powered future?
Well, it depends on the NT government and the way that they approach it, I guess.
Yep.
Federally, where there is a concern, we have a water trigger within federal legislation.
Yep.
So Tanya Plibersek, who is the Environment Minister,
Correct.
has asked a independent scientific group to do a review of any dangers
Yep.
to
Territory water. Yep.
as a result of unconventional gas operations in the Beetaloo. So that's important. In the same way that the Pepper inquiry was important.
So I just wanted to just quickly touch on the Pepper report. So that, it handed its recommendations down that's saying fracking or fractured gas is a safe thing to do if you implement all the
recommendations.
Are we sort of, given that report was handed down some years ago, are we in a state where we're kind of duplicating things at the moment in a regulatory manner? Some people might have said that if a Territory Labor government had been re-elected, this kind of water trigger wouldn't have been pulled, or however the mechanism works. How do you sort of see that at the moment?
Look, I haven't got a crystal ball, obviously, to see an alternate future where the Territory Labor government wasn't sort of wiped out of. But and I'm not laughing about that. We lost a lot of good people, a lot of good policy people, and a lot of good experience. But
you had a good run though.
And I am really looking forward to working with the Chief Minister, Leah Finocchiaro, and the new government, because we can't afford that sort of partisan stoush. I've made a couple of comments today on the podcast just about where we have shifted things federally from the last coalition federal government. Where we value things differently. In the tax system, when it comes to the incomes, take-home pay of lower and middle income Australians. But I think the environment is another one. That's not only just driving renewables, driving a net zero by 2050 and the things that we need to do as a responsible member of the global community, but it's also in an area of environmental protection. We want industry to have certainty, but we also want to make sure that there isn't, by state and territory governments, a neglect of their responsibilities. I'll give you two quick examples. One is in water policy. The second is in land clearing. Now, we want to grow the north. We want to grow industry. We want to grow agriculture. We want to take advantage of our abundant natural resources. We want to do that in a way that doesn't affect our water adversely. One, we want clean rivers. We want a clean Darwin Harbour. We want Aboriginal people who are out on country to know that they've got safe water that they're obviously dependent on, particularly if you happen to live in a desert where their water security as well as food security is a real issue. So I think there would have been a review of Beetaloo operations from a water perspective, whether there's Eva Lawler become the Chief Minister or not.
Right.
Why I think it's important is because people need to know where things stand and whether there are appropriate, whether the government is appropriately positioned to make sure that those recommendations from PEPA are enforced. Because a recommendation is only as good as its ability to be monitored and implemented. So I think it's timely that a group of independent scientists have a look at this, right? And if we can't maintain our clean, green, basically offering to Australia and the world, which is what we've currently got, not only from a food and water point of view, but from a tourism point of view, then what have we got? We're just going to be another place that degrades itself from an environmental point of view in order to have industry have free rein. We want to empower industry to do well, but we also want to make sure that that's done in an environmentally and culturally appropriate way. And I do think that working together we can get that balance right, because we have got abundant resources and hopefully we've got a commitment to do it together. Now, there is legislation in front of the Senate that is about having an overarching federal Environmental Protection Act that basically will work with states and territories, but to make sure that there is a baseline standard that means that we don't have a situation where any state and territory of any colour or any political party running a state and territory government, it's to work with them and maintain the standards that I think the Australian people want and deserve.
Upon reflection of the NT general election, it was quite a resounding victory. Upon looking back, you could almost say it was probably a referendum on crime. How did you sort of see that outcome? And I'm sure there's a little bit of soul searching going on in the Territory Labor Party at the moment. Yeah,
there's a lot of soul searching required, and it's a really big question. How did we, as a political organisation, the Labor Party, lose the confidence of Territorians? In some way, crime was dominant, and really the responsibility of any government, certainly the responsibility of the federal government when it comes to the national security of our nation, but when it comes to the territory government, it's law and order. Are the settings right? Are the agencies resourced in a way? And have you got the confidence of people that you're doing everything within your power to mean that they're safe?
Yep.
They're safe in public places, they're safe in their home. And I think the big message sent to the former Labor government was that people had lost confidence in them and they wanted to give another government a go, and they send that message in a really strong way.
Yep.
And I think it will be now for the NT government to grapple with those big issues because crime hasn't gone away. Just down the road from my place, some people come in from a community, stole 7 vehicles and were getting ready to convoy back to their remote Aboriginal community when they were interdicted by the police. Some of the cars got away, some didn't.
Yep.
Now, that all happened under the current NT government's watch. So is crime...
Where's the outcry?
Where's the outcry? And where's the talkback radio going berserk about
Katie
that?
Wolf, yeah.
But crime isn't going away, and it's not just the territory. All around this country, we've got an issue with particularly youth crime. I'm a big fan of being smart on working with those young people to stop the reoffending rather than turn them into career criminals by putting them in an inappropriate place, which was basically what the old Berrima jail is turned into Dondale. And I'm glad there's going to be a new facility for young people.
Yep.
But I don't think that criminalising young people is the answer. We've got to be much smarter than that. I'd been advocating for some time about more opportunities out on country for young people and their families, because you can't work with a young person in isolation. You've got to work with their family as well, because that's a unit that they're going back to after they have any experience, whether it be on a remote sort of camp on country or even just outside of Darwin, but in a bush setting where they can just reset and get some support, get some mentoring, get a re-evaluation, get away from any substance abuse issues that they might have had, because young people have them as well. And with the family, sort of reset and have a recommitment to getting after all the opportunities that are out there, the employment opportunities, the sporting opportunities, opportunities that they're denied if they decide that how they're going to make something of their life is as a criminal and breaking into other people's houses and terrorising other people. So the police are one element. Getting them visible out in society, as the NT government is going to do, is really important. Supporting them from a mental health point of view, because they do a very difficult job, is important. But I think really solving those issues of people feeling safe again, it's as much the everyday Territorians' responsibility is to work together sort of as a team, as it were, to make sure that there is the public support for working with kids. That's why that youth engagement hub that I've funded, I think, plays an important role, but also camps where you bring in First Nations elders to work with kids. And also, not all crime is committed by young Indigenous people either. So there's got to be a real focus on giving young people who haven't got the mentoring and support and love around them that certainly I had when I was growing up, and lots of people enjoy. I think sometimes we kind of lack the compassion just to say, well, maybe young people who have gone down the wrong track didn't have the support, guidance, discipline around them, or a loving environment around them. And we know, unfortunately, in many cases, they had the complete opposite, where they weren't supervised at all. They may have been abused. And we've seen some of this come out in the shocking youth suicide and other suicide statistics that we have here in the Territory. And no Territorian wants that. So that's why I just think we need to continue to fund and support not only our police, but our domestic violence services, our prevention services in particular, and different campaigns. I was at an event, spoken event just this last weekend, where families that have lost loved ones come together, not only to support each other and to remember their loved ones who are gone, but to say to other people who are reaching out for support, support's there. So engage with it, because everyone struggles at some time or another. And there's no stigma in not being 100% on top of everything when it comes to your mental health. It happens with everyone. So, and it also happens with people who start self-medicating and try and find their belonging within a group of young people who happen to because they're bored, going out and or they want some money, or they want some grog, or they want something, breaking into other people's houses. So the new NT government has made some changes to alcohol policy. I'm really worried about that. Let's see how it goes. But making grog cheaper and more available and taking away the BDR, I'm struggling to see. I know some people felt that the BDR was inconvenient, but I'm struggling to see how making grog cheaper is going to help us with the problems we have with grog in the Territory. But let's see, and let's make sure that all of our services are funded appropriately to get around this really difficult issue, not only from an NT government perspective, but from a community perspective. And I have already said to the NT government, I will bring to you all the support that you need to do your job to keep Territorians safe.
Yep.
You just let me know what you need. And that goes in industry, but it certainly goes for giving them the tools that they need. Look, the Territory government is nearly 80% dependent on Commonwealth funding.
Yep.
Let us know what you need, but at the same time, we want, as Territorians, to be able to stand more independently on our own 2 feet. That's why we need industry. That will provide the jobs that our kids are after. We need to do that in an environmentally sustainable way. So they're the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that I'm putting together as not only the federal member for Darwin and Palmerston, but a proud Territorian and supporter of the Territory industry. But that's got to be done in a way that maintains our lifestyle. Putting that all together, bringing federal resources to bear. The Prime Minister's given me this new role as his special envoy for Northern Australia. That means, working across the north, not only with defence but with other industries, to make sure that we've got more opportunities up here for people. Now, that brings in another issue just quickly, and that is around what it is to be regional. I talked about the geographic narcissism that we face from some people down south that don't believe we can do advanced manufacturing, for example. The reality is that we've got Territory businesses here that are good to go, good to put in their millions of dollars of their own money in order for the North to have its own advanced manufacturing capacity. That's important when there's supply chain issues. That's important when you're supporting more ADF, Border Protection and other federal agencies in the North. And that's important when you're taking a bigger role in supporting this net zero opportunity. Because if we've got advanced manufacturing here, and there are grants federally that I'm fighting for to help local businesses to have that advanced manufacturing capacity, we need to continue to have that fight. But we are committed as a responsible member of the global community to net zero. We can't keep having the increases in temperature that 99% of scientists worldwide agree are happening and are driven by burning fossil fuels. That's why net zero is important. We don't want the Territory getting any hotter, right? We want also our neighbours in the Pacific Ocean to have a future. We need to keep downward pressure on those temperature rises by warming the planet less. That's what net zero is all about. We've got a plan to do it in a way that's going to be great for the NT economy, because it's going to take advantage on all our benefits when it comes to gas, when it comes to as a transitional fuel, but also our critical minerals, as well as our solar and our wind. We've got pretty good wind too. There's no wind turbines up in the Territory at the moment, but everywhere else in Australia that's got wind, they're going nuts for it. So there's some companies that think that we have good wind that could also feed into the grid and make a contribution there too. So we've got great resources. The federal government is so important to realising that potential.
Yep. Selena Ubo, so NT Labor Party leader, opposition leader. What can you tell us about her? Have you got a good relationship with her? And will she have the Leah Finocchiaro-like capacity to bring the Labor Party back from the brink, just as Leah did after basically almost being decimated in 2012?
Yeah, it's a very good question about the rebuilding. A lot of people forget that in 2012 the CLP were down to 2 members. It was Gary and Leah. So Selena's got double that in that she's got 4 members. She's got a deputy, Duran Young, who's out in Daly, has got a lot of experience in that water area, which is good. Some challenges there, we need to get after. And the other two members that she's got are in the bush. I think part of Leah's success in rebuilding the CLP is that they made all their ground up, not in the bush, but in Darwin and Palmerston. But she was obviously based in Palmerston and Gary out in the rural area at Daly. So I think that was an advantage for them as well. And Selena will be able to rebuild the party. I'm confident of that. I'm not going to make any predictions here about a one-term or a two-term rebuild or return to government. There's that soul searching that we mentioned. Those 4 Labor members have got a big job to make sure that they keep the CLP NT government accountable. But I think they'll be working in a bipartisan way wherever there's sensible policy to be supportive of it.
Yep.
But that's what an opposition's for, is to keep the government of the day, particularly when you've got such a big mandate. You respect the mandate, but you're also, because there's no second house of review in the Northern Territory, there's no sort of upper house or Senate chamber where things can policy can be reviewed again. Essentially, if Leah and her cabinet think something is a good idea, that's going to become NT law. So the NT mob play an important role. I've been impressed by Selena for a very long time. In fact, one of my younger brothers was teaching in the Territory around the same time that Selena was, and he actually said to me, mate, you want to watch Selena Yubo. She's got a lot of potential, a lot of talent. Next minute, I saw she was running the NT Youth Parliament. Next minute, she's in the Parliament. And now she's the leader of the Labor opposition. She is from Numbawa, so understands, and her office is in Katherine. Obviously, she's going to need to spend a fair bit of time in Darwin and Palmerston, and really, with me and others, really get to grips with what it was that and what it is that Darwin and Palmerston really sent those solid messages about. We've already talked about some of them, but there's others. We need, obviously, as part of that rebuilding, to listen, not talk. It's been fantastic to have a good yarn on the podcast, but to really listen to people. And I guess that's my message to those listening to your podcast today, is that I do back-to-back meetings when I'm here in Darwin and Palmerston, and again when I'm down in Canberra. Some people think, listen to too many people, it sort of can divide your attention, but I basically want to get after as many expert voices as I can, and it also helps you to triangulate or calibrate what you're hearing and get different perspectives on different issues so you can make wise decisions. And I think, that's got to be the role, right? To work hard, to make wise decisions on what we're supporting, so that we do what works. My overarching, and I'm sure Selena's overarching mantra is going to be what works. What is it that works? And if we're doing something that doesn't work, don't do it. Do something that works. Is a particular approach to youth justice working? No. All right, well, what does work? What is going to work? Let's get after that.
Yep.
If it comes to industry or something, any other element of government policy, if it's not working, what is going to work? I'm sure Selena will take that. I'm having a good sit down with her this week to talk through a number of policy areas, and just to have a bit of a recap on where we were, where we are, and where we want to go. But overall, it's got to be what works. What's going to work here in the Territory, and that's the only context where we're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'd love to have her on the podcast. So if you could put in a good word from us, mate, that'd be much appreciated. But just quickly, I know you're a busy man. I've only got a couple more questions and we'll let you go. We've got a looming Queensland state election. If Stephen Miles, the Premier, gets soundly beaten, do you think that could be a bellwether for the federal election? Considering, I guess, what's happened in the Territory as well?
Yeah, look, I don't know what the
polling data
what the polling data and the
I think it's pretty mixed at the moment.
Or what the bookies are saying. Like,
no, I haven't looked at the bookies.
So the bookies had it pretty right on the Territory election.
Yep,
I think the CLP were like $1.40 and Labor was like $2.70.
Yep.
I endorse responsible wagering. So, but yeah, look. They don't always get it 100%, but in the case of the Territory, they predicted, I think, the scale. I've heard that in having been a long-term government, that Labor in Queensland may be in for a bit of a difficult time of it coming up. I've met Stephen Miles and had a couple of good yarns with him. Look, I think he's a quality person who loves Queensland and wants to do the right thing by Queenslanders. I think to some extent what happened here in the Territory is they went, well, Labor has had 2 terms. By the way, 3 leaders, not great. The way in which that leadership transition was handled, not great. Mm-hmm. And I think that also played a part in the result we saw recently.
Sure.
Smoother transition from Anastasia Palaszczuk to Stephen Miles. Same youth crime issues in Queensland.
Yep.
If the Queenslanders go, we want to give the LNP another go after the disaster that was the Campbell-Newman government. That'll say something to Queensland Labor, but if you consider we don't have many seats federally in Queensland. If you consider who we have got, Annika Wells, who looks after sport and aged care and is bringing through the parliament at the moment some really great aged care policy that's going to be really important for us too, by the way, because we are running out of an ability, or we have run out of an ability to have senior Territorians go into either a residential aged care bed or into be supported from home. We're pushing that more people can stay at home longer, and they've got the support to do that because most seniors want to stay at home longer. For those who want to go into a residential care scenario, think about Regis, think about Pearl and others. We need more of that capacity, and we need the federal government to help with that capacity. We haven't got enough beds. So I'm working with CODA and obviously with Annika Wells. She's a Queenslander anyway. So we love Annika. We want her to help us with our sporting infrastructure, but also obviously with our aged care beds. And she's a Queenslander though. Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer. He's the one that's got the purse strings with the ERC, who make all the decisions about priorities with the Cabinet's advice about where money's going to go. He's a Queenslander. Murray Watt, we've got Nita Green up in Cairns, but we haven't got many people in regional Queensland Labor. That is where the Labor Party was born off. Bar Caldon and the Shearers wanting to give a better go for workers. So that's what we're trying to do, is give a better go for workers, reconnect with our base that we've drawn away from. This is a roundabout way of saying that no, I don't think if Queensland Labor gets beaten, it spells disaster for federal Labor.
Okay.
If anything, I think that Queenslanders and sometimes Territorians to as well like to see a bit of balance. So you could even see, I'll just tell you now, for example, I know that we've got a quality candidate in Cairns and we've got a retiring Liberal member. So federally in Cairns, I think Labor will do well there. And we might have, again, federal Labor in northern Queensland. That will be great for Northern Australia. Why? Is because even if there is a Queensland LNP government, too often Queensland governments are controlled from Brisbane, which is a long, long way away from northern Queensland, and they don't get the due attention that they deserve. With my focus on defence of Northern Australia and Northern Australian policy and making sure there's enough money to fund that through the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility and other funding mechanisms, I think that'd be good to have Labor represented federally up in northern Queensland. But anyway, that's just one example. I don't think it's going to mean a write-off. We might lose some in WA, but pick up some in Queensland. Labor, I'm confident, and I'm going to touch wood now, but we have been running a good government that's focused on cost of living that I think will maintain the confidence of the Australian people in the next federal election, which will probably be early next year. Mm-hmm. That's our focus. Lower and middle income people, making sure that they've got what they need to provide for their families and that the economy is growing. Now, one thing we haven't touched on too much, and I'll just touch on quickly, is we need to make sure our migration settings are right. What we're doing there is having a look at, Melbourne and Sydney are screaming. They're like, we've got too many people already. There's too much pressure on housing, too much pressure on infrastructure. But meanwhile, there's lots of places in regional Australia that are like, we need people. So we're reviewing regional migration at the moment.
Yep.
We can't attract people, and territory businesses can't attract people because they're in competition with the Gold Coast and Geelong, who are treated the same as we are. But that's rubbish because we're very different jurisdictions. Gold Coast has got a lot more amenity, got a lot more opportunity than we have, just in terms of its ability to attract workforce, skilled workers. And so is Geelong. They're just bigger places. They're closer to major capital cities. Whereas we're a long way from major capital cities. We're a small capital city. We're a proud but small capital city, and we have a need for skilled workers. So we want to get that, and we will get that balance right as a federal government. The federal government is so important for Darwin because not only do we provide most of the funding for the territory, but we've got some of those big employment providers, defence being one. What we're finding with our defence policy too, and I was a big part of getting this policy together in opposition when the coalition were in government federally. We worked with the master builders, we worked in a bipartisan way to say this massive defence spend has got to work for local companies. But we're now up to about an 80% of funding spent in the territory is spent on local, it goes through local companies. We've broken down the size of the packages of work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's really been beneficial. But we also lead the country when it comes to First Nations companies getting some of that work as well. Why is that important? Because young First Nations people feel more culturally safe working in Indigenous companies that understand the pressures on them, can work with them, can be good mentors for them. And just locally, I point out AKJ Services as one good local company, First Nations owned and operated, that's really making a difference in bringing young kids through as apprentices, giving them a go as trainees, but physically showing them the jobs that they can do and how much better that is than the alternative of either not working, sitting on a couch, or worse, being out causing trouble. So that's why that First Nations business, great result that we're having here in the NT. Defence is leading the Commonwealth in procurement going to First Nations businesses. It's still small, but it's leading the country, and it's really important.
You've already answered the question I was going to ask you about the early election next year, so I won't ask that one, but and I'll finish on this one. So as the incumbent member for Solomon going into a federal election, what are the hot button issues that you think are going to decide the election, and what's going to be your focus?
Well, I don't want to give away too much of the game plan ahead of time. But I just want to say to people, if you've listened this far in the podcast, you've heard me talk about a whole range of things. All of those are going to be really important in this upcoming election. What's my overriding philosophy is fighting for the North in Canberra, making sure they know not only our opportunity but are funding that opportunity for the benefit of people who live here and for the benefit of the nation, whether that be in defence or industry, whatever it is, or the cultural diversity that we have here, the First Nations brilliance that we have here. Maximising those opportunities, local companies get a go, First Nations organisations get a go, and having our migration settings right so that we can sustainably grow our population so that there's more amenity here. Amenity goes with population. So people can expect that they see more commitments from me around amenity, increasing amenity, but they can also expect to see me do things that don't have a commitment attached to it, like continuing pressure on the airlines to not gouge us, continuing to work with the NT government in a bipartisan way to make this a safer place to live. They can expect to see that as well, but also need to keep bringing the money to the North.
Yep.
And that's what I'm getting after every day with the North Australia focus, the defence focus that I've got, and the veterans focus that I've got. The stuff that we already have committed, making sure that is happening on the ground, but happening in a way that benefits Territorians and territory businesses as much as possible. And then more funding coming through so that we can make this a more livable place, but also a place that does more of the heavy lifting when it comes to the net zero future. So that means the renewables piece, the critical minerals piece, because that's where we've got competitive advantages. Getting that product to market will continue to make not only our country richer, but us here in the North richer. It'll be great for employment. But overall, whether it comes to social policy, and this is really important too, I think, we can't have an ongoing situation where we have settings in social policy that drive negative social outcomes. So your listeners will hear more about that into the future. But we can't be enabling substance abuse. We can't be enabling domestic violence. We want to be able to support people with a safety net, but not at the expense of the safety of people, not at the expense of inappropriate use of taxpayer money. So what do I want overall? I want stuff that works. I want stuff that works on the ground for Territorians so that this is the best place in the world to live. I live here with my family, and Kate and I are bringing our kids up in the Territory because I reckon it's the best place to live. More people coming here will see that it's a great place to live. We'll manage that growth sustainably, and we'll make sure that there is environmental protections that are sensible and that work, and we'll get that balance right. But ultimately, Territorians will be the judge. I don't want to say that there won't be an early election because it's always up to the Prime Minister and his closest advisors, me being one of them, to give him advice on that. But look, I think we should have 4-year terms. You get more governing done. We tend to feel like we're continually in a situation where it's continual campaigning rather than continual governing. And then when you get to the end of your governing bit, you put your offering to the people. But more than that, you've been governing for 3.5 years and people have had a good look at what you said you were going to do, whether you did it or not. These tight turnarounds in elections, 3-year non-fixed term means it can often be 2.5 years of governing. If you're a new government, we did hit the ground running as a federal government. I don't think anyone could deny that. I think Anthony Albanese, if I can get this plug in for the boss, has done an incredible job, and I really appreciate not only how often he comes to the Territory, but the support that myself, Melandiri McCarthy, who's now the First Nations Minister of the Nation, and Marion Scrimgeour, who looks after all the rest of the Territory outside of Darwin and Palmerston. We get a good hearing from the Prime Minister and his key people, and we're appreciative of that. Albo will be out again soon for the dedication of the Cyclone Tracy Memorial, and to help us remember that 50 years ago, most of Darwin was blown away. You know, I secured that money with Albo's support because, you know, it's a big anniversary and we should, and in fact there's a memorial, there's a couple of installations really to mark that important anniversary. The other one is 25 years, and that's this week that, you know, Darwin supported, you know, the response into those events in Timor 25 years ago, and you know, Darwin continues to be important because it is the place by which our nation has not only a gateway to our region for the purposes of responding to natural disasters or, you know, man-made disasters, but we're really a city that is in our region that's open for business, that is attracting a lot of investment from the Indo-Pacific region. Places like Japan and Korea are examples, but also Singapore. We trade with China, Taiwan. We want to continue to play our role for our nation, but also be a place that continues to lead the world when it comes to those green industries, and that's why, you know, Sun Cable is so important. So I think we've got the settings right at a federal level to enable that position that we have to continue, and that's why I hope to continue to have the support of Territorians when it comes to the next federal election, but also into the future.
I think that's a good note to leave this one on, Luke, if you don't mind.
It's been fantastic to chat, and mate, I really appreciate it.
Luke Gosling, member for Solomon, thanks very much, mate, and best of luck with the federal election.
Cheers.
Thanks everyone. See you next time.